It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Support for this podcast comes from Invent Together. I bet you didn't know that inventing activity by Black inventors peaked in 1899, and it has never recovered. Black and Hispanic college graduates patented half the rate of white college graduates. That's just one of the reasons why you need to know about Invent Together. When our patent system gets more diverse, our nation will get stronger and more successful. Find out how you can help diverse inventors and unleash economic opportunity at inventtogether.org.
You are Locked On NC State, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Wolfpack fans. It's me again, Kenta Gibbs, bringing you another episode of Locked On Wolfpack. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have more information on what has happened on the exact timeline of how everything went down as far as us being pulled from the College World Series. And this information was not provided by the NCAA. It was provided by Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball. Shout out to Kendall. Go over to the website, check out the article, subscribe as well, support the work that the man does because he did some darn good reporting and journalism with this piece. But honestly and truly, there are multiple concerning factors about this, yet and still. And I'm going to highlight some important parts here. In the first segment, all I'm going to do is read through some of the important parts of this thing for you. And then I'm going to highlight some of the parts that are rather confusing and problematic. But before I even get into the reading of what has happened in the timelines that were reported by Kendall Rogers, I want to first talk about the fact that notice that at no point in time I have said this is the information direct from the NCAA. This is the information released directly from the NCAA. I have been saying this for a while, and I still mean it. The NCAA as we know it is coming to an end. The NCAA as the governing body with all the power that they have right now as we know it is coming to an end, and this will be one of the seminal moments that people point to and saying, this was what got the ball truly rolling, or this is what further pushed the ball down the hill. Okay? Because this whole situation was handled like just complete and utter nonsense. So I'm going to break you all off with the highlights or the important parts of each day. And from there, we'll get into dissecting a little bit. June 20th, NCAA confirmed the testing day before the Vanderbilt game. NC State has no positive tests. Everything's good to go. We play. June 21st, we beat Vanderbilt 1-0. Ellie and David pointed out that a few players of the traveling party, including a player, had caught a bug and were needing some rest. He pointed out that other players were dealing with this bug too. The NCAA found out later Monday that one of the players who had the bug had a roommate removed at some point on Sunday, which created some concern inside the NCAA. Tuesday, June 22nd. The player that Avon said had a bug on Monday tested positive for COVID, which deemed him not clear to participate and thus was directed to isolate. The roommate of the individual who was in direct contact was then directed to quarantine according to the NCAA. The NCAA later found out that the first individual was symptomatic prior to Monday's game, which Avent alluded to in his press conference. Avent did not know at the time that it was COVID-19. However, just to make that perfectly clear, Avent assistant coach Chris Hart and others were also tested and were COVID-19 negative. So they continue to test the close contact in hopes that they could come out of quarantine sooner and perhaps they could actually play. Also on Tuesday, the NCAA sought out NC State to find out which members of the traveling party Avon was referring to when he said some of our guys have a bug. Those persons were identified and when tested on June 22nd, they were negative. Between Tuesday and Friday, NC State attempted to have the roommate of the first individual tested each day to potentially test out and be able to pitch. The request was not granted, though the individual wound up testing positive later in the week anyway. So, Friday, June 25th, given the fact that NC State was scheduled to play Vanderbilt at 1 p.m. that day, it was not considered to be a testing day. However, the individual who was in close contact with the COVID positive player was tested in hopes that he would come up negative and be able to play sooner. However, that player tested positive for COVID-19. He was then deemed out of action. That gave NC State 2 confirmed positive tests. The same morning, NC State discovered 2 more players had shown symptoms consistent with COVID-19, so they were proactive and sent them over to Marriott for further testing. Those results arrived 90 minutes before the Vanderbilt game. Both members of the traveling party were positive for COVID-19. That took NC State's COVID positive total to 4. At that point, the NCAA took this matter up the chain to the championship medical team to further evaluate the situation at hand, which is what created the 45-minute delay in that game start time. It's worth noting the 2 players who tested positive that morning were unvaccinated players. At this point, the NCAA informed NC State that unvaccinated players would be removed from the game and only vaccinated players could play in the game. The NCAA gave NC State the option to either forfeit or try to play Saturday or play with a limited roster. Or play on with a limited roster. Avon and his team opted to play, though NC State sources say they proposed to the NCAA to play a doubleheader between the 2 teams on Saturday. Instead, that request was denied. At the start of the game, unvaccinated members of the PAC team were taken to the Marriott and tested. All of those unvaccinated members of the team were negative for COVID-19, including several prominent players on the roster. None of those ball players were able to return to the ballpark in time to enter the game. With NC State having 4 positive COVID-19 tests, the team reached outbreak status, which then caused the NCAA to get all the members of the team tested, including the vaccinated members who played in the Friday game against Vandy. NC State sources estimate the full team testing occurred around 7:30 Friday night, and that by 11 p.m. that evening, they still hadn't gotten word on test results. There's a lot of frustration from the NC State side of things on the lack of communication during that time frame. Shortly after that point, the results began to trickle in for each player. 4 players, all vaccinated, had tested positive for COVID-19, with all the other players testing negative. 8 total members of NC State's traveling party had tested positive for COVID. According to NC State sources, it was around 1 a.m. on Saturday, June 26th, that they were declared a no contest for Saturday's game against Vanderbilt. Thus, their season was over. It was then that all the COVID-negative players decided to make the trek over to TD Ameritrade Park for one last picture behind home plate after a somber meeting with head coach Elliott Avon and his staff. With 8 positive tests and impending contact tracing, the NCAA's point of view was that it would be impossible for NC State to finish the tournament while also caring about the health and safety of participants. Of course, that reasoning will be hotly contested by those who saw countless send-off and welcoming parties at different teams' hotels around downtown Omaha over the past 2 weeks. All COVID-negative members of NC State's traveling party returned home to Raleigh and were greeted by thousands of fans at a welcome party at Doak Field. Those members will now have to quarantine for at least 7 days, including Avon. Sunday, June 27th, all COVID-positive members of the NC State traveling party returned home to Raleigh via a private flight from Omaha's Eppley Airfield. So, those are the facts. That is the facts as reported by Kendall Rogers. Now, there are so many things to break down and get into there. And I said I was going to highlight it. I said I was just going to highlight parts, but I changed my mind halfway through reading the first part of it, and I said, I got to bring y'all the whole thing. Because I want to bring y'all the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I don't want anybody to be confused by anything that I've said here today. So we're about to get into the nitty gritty of why this still, or after rather, hearing that, after reading that, I was even more pissed off than I was before. But before I get into that, let me tell you about betonline.ag. BetOnline.ag is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. With so many sports coming down to their championships right now, and look at that, most teams are allowed to play in theirs. That's really nice. It is time for you all to track all the action at betonline.ag. Get all the latest news, odds, and info for all your sporting needs, regardless of the sport, whether it be MLB, the NBA, NHL, and even the fights. Before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. This is your chance to get in the game as teams prep for their runs at championships. Head to the website to get your 50 and sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Use promo code LOCKEDON when you go.
This episode is brought to you by HP Instant Ink. No one is reading your mind, but HP Instant Ink knows when your printer is running low and sends you new cartridges, so you never have to think about ink. Save up to 50%. You'll pay less than $5 a month for ink and never run out again. Find out if your printer is eligible and enroll today at hpinstantink.com. Conditions apply. For details, visit hp.com/instantink Spotify.
Now, I just read to you the reporting as done by Kendall Rogers, word for word, bit for bit. Now, everything that he said that everything that he wrote was confirmed by multiple sources from both sides of this thing, from the NCAA and from NC State. And let me start by saying this. I am not a person who believes that Vanderbilt's head coach asked for more testing, but even if he did, I don't care. I would never put it on the opponent for being shysty or being shady or anything along those lines when there's a governing body that's supposed to be the middleman to stop that. So I'm not really too concerned with what Vandy's got going on. Whether or not they deserve to be there, whether or not they deserve to be there, that's not for me to decide. Whatever, more power to them. This ain't about them. This is about the NCAA. Because not an ounce of what they are saying or what I just read to you all makes sense. I have never claimed, or let me not lie like that. I rarely claim to be the smartest guy in the room. I really and truly do. However, the part that confuses me there are many parts that confuse me about this endlessly. And I'm not even going to get on the players and the coaches, the players and the family of the players coming out and tweeting different things about what had happened, what had occurred there that was various. I'm just going to go by just what a completely unbiased, completely middle of the road source had to tell us. I am confused as to how players are testing negative and yet they still are not allowed to play. I'm confused by this. I am okay. You know what? Fine. We'll even go with, hey, there was contact tracing and all this and that. And okay, sure. I am confused as to how negative players are not allowed to play. But when you compound that on top of the fact that they are tweeting out the College World Series account, the official account now, is tweeting out the daily attendance to these games. I haven't seen it under 20K. I haven't seen it under that. And maybe there were some days where it was under 20K and I just didn't see them. But I have, either way, however many you packed in there, be it 15, 16, 17, whatever the number was, that was the lowest. You've packed in thousands of people. You've put in no protocols for the fans. People have said plenty of times the ridiculousness of the idea that had NC State as a team decided, you know what, we're going to show these guys, all of us are going to buy tickets and sit in the front row. They would have been allowed to do so. And yet, an instant forfeit is what's best for player safety and health. Come on. What? We're talking about, so 2 members of the traveling party and 6 members of the team. The travel team is 27 players. They travel with 27. 21 ain't good enough. Okay, so we're assuming that, hey, the 6 players, all of them, you got to have 1 or 2 folks that are out because of contact tracing with them and all that good stuff. Why not just test them again before the game? Why not? Because, again, you're not testing the fans. And here's the biggest thing of what blows me the most out of this. First of all, if you're even going to go the route of allowing fans, the bare minimum that should have been in place, the bare minimum, even if we acknowledge this is a huge cash grab from the NCAA, but on just a small little tiny microscopic level, we're going to pretend in some way to have protocols and care. The least you could have said was no players who are still active and playing in a tournament are allowed to interact with fans. That would have been the minimum. It was not done. It was not done. Cops is the only player that I've seen interacting with fans so far who had no more games left in the tournament. Everybody else is signing autographs. And I'm not saying every player was interacting with the fans, but I've seen multiple players from almost every team out there signing autographs and smoothing with the fans and talking to the fans. No mask, no social distancing, no none of that. And you're telling me that this made sense. I am baffled. I'm baffled how you have nearly 22,000 at these games. How you have all of these people at these games, and you're telling me, oh yeah, well this team is nearing outbreak phase, and we can't risk it. We can't. And again, the gut punch of all this, even if you don't agree with me on anything that I've said so far, even if you are the staunchest NC State hater in the universe, I think at a basic level, we should all agree that the complete lack of transparency from the NCAA, the complete lack of putting out any type of formal, hey, this is what happened, this is why things happened as they did, that at bare minimum is a horrible look. At bare minimum. The fact that it was 20 plus guys allowed to take that final picture, after they were ruled a no contest. And I'm going to let that sit on you for a second. They were allowed to gather and take a picture, but they weren't allowed to play. It boggles the mind. It boggles the mind, especially when you consider, like Mr. Rogers said in his article, you've got the welcoming and send-offs for these different teams, where again, you have hundreds to thousands of fans, no mask, no social distancing, just vibes. And you're telling me that this is about player health and safety? Come on. Tell a better lie. Because if you come with something better, at least I can feel like you tried in lying to me. At least I can feel like you cared about my feelings and you said, you know what, I'm going to lie to him, but I'm going to lie to him nicely. So it's at least like something that he can say, that's plausible. But this here is a sham, and people are talking about, oh, look, they're hanging a pretend national championship. This team is the champs. This team is the champs. And there is no way around that. Because the nonsense that happened there, like we were talking about with Andrew Snicker, you think this happens in the college football playoff? You think this happens in the Final Four? No way. No way. All the teams that have had their seasons ended by this thing, all non-revenue generating. There were players who tested positive on different teams throughout the season. They may have had to sit out a game or two. That was about it. And even their players that were in protocol were able to dress out, able to be on the sideline, able to do all the whippity-doo-dah and hippity days. So this is why I say this should be concerning for any fan, regardless of who you're a fan of. Even if this had happened to the university, no consequences, I would get a couple chuckles off, but then I would seriously say, now, wait a minute. This is overreach of the highest order. This is blatant undermining and contradiction and hypocrisy of the highest order. You've got 20,000 fans in a place, allowing players to interact with them, and you're telling me that this is about player health and safety. Wow. You've got the NCAA report. You've got the NCAA saying, well, we went according to their county's medical team's advice. And the medical team of that county saying, we said no such thing that the NCAA had to pull them. We said that we'd support whatever they did, whatever their decision was. Again, I'm at the end of the day, hey, get vaccinated, avoid all this. Sure. All right, I'm there. But now, once you get past that, there's still a world of trouble. I don't believe that one person making a bad decision or deciding not to do a thing or whatever the case may be, then gives everyone else the right to do whatever. That's not how that works. It's just not. And to see that happening with the NCAA today, hey, get your LOLs off, get your chuckles off, get your, just get vaccinated, that's all you gotta do. Get them off, sure. But know that from what we've seen with the NCAA, how do you know it's not going to be your team's turn next? How do you know it's not going to be your team's turn next? This was a disgusting move, and the even if we say, well, the testing and all that made sense, well, the timing and all that, it made sense because of the fact that they were tested at 7:30 at night and all that. Sure, okay. Regardless of when NC State knew, there should have been a press conference to let the public know. There should have been a press conference where questions and answers were taken so that not only would the media know, not only would NC State know, but the casual fan who wants to know what happened. How did that team that stole everybody's heart in Omaha, how did they just get removed all of a sudden? There are details, there are facts, there is something given by NCAA representatives. I have heard nothing. And people, trust me, I got some DMs about Boo Corrigan and his response and all that good stuff. And I'm not going to speak on it. I'm going to plead the fifth on that. I'm going to just plead the fifth and let that rock. their thoughts, now's not the time. Because there will be a time and place for all of the others to be criticized. But this is the moment where the NCAA needs to be called to the carpet for a plethora of nonsense. A plethora of nonsense that is not debatable, is not arguable. There's no world in which this makes sense. The NCAA needs to be called to the carpet for that. Even if we go beyond the 20,000 person crowd, even if we pretend, oh, the crowd, they're not going to interact with the crowd long. Even when they're signing the autograph, you immediately scurry away like a roach when the lights turn on. I guess that's what we're pretending to do for that. But there's so much going on with the crowd, and they're not really with the players. So the welcoming and send-offs that Mr. Rogers was referencing, what about those? Again, this makes no sense, and that can't be argued. And another thing that can't be argued is how delicious Built Bar is. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. And did you know that it has 9 delicious flavors? And that's not even counting the limited time flavors. Coconut, coconut almond, cherry, raspberry, mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel. There is something for everybody. And you know what? My favorite flavor of the group would probably be salted caramel. But these flavors are just delicious. If you haven't tried all the flavors, you can get a mixed box, so you'll get 2 of each of the 9. Not only are Built Bars the best tasting, but they're healthy too. Good to you and good for you. Most Built Bars have as many as 17 or 18 grams of protein with as little as 130 to 180 calories, 4 to 5 grams of sugar, as well as 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Order today and get your raspberry or mint brownie or cherry or whatever you like. Go to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your first order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com.
This episode is brought to you by ESPN Plus. Dustin Poirier and Conor the Notorious McGregor will settle the score at UFC 264 on Saturday, July 10th, exclusively on ESPN Plus. After Conor McGregor defeated Poirier in 2014, Poirier evened the score in January, setting up the most highly anticipated rubber match in UFC history. UFC 264 is exclusively available to ESPN Plus subscribers for $69.99. Or sign up now to get UFC 264 and an ESPN Plus annual plan for $89.98. Visit espnplus.com/Spotify.
So, friends, I'm about to land this thing. But again, I do not like situations where, number one, I'm not provided with information direct from the source. I don't like that. I really and truly don't. And again, this is strictly just piping down the middle. This is what is being told by the journalist who has his boots on the ground and all that. This is completely omitting Reed Johnson's mother saying that her kid was tested 6 times. 6 times. All negative, still not allowed to play. This is completely omitting that. All I'm talking to you right now is the stuff that was reported from the folks who have boots on the ground, who did the work, who have no vested interest in either side of this thing. And it still appears as if the NCAA had fumbled majorly here. Had fumbled majorly. As I've said plenty of times, at the end of the day, I'm okay with if this had become a situation where it was so serious or where it was so many players infected that it didn't make sense to try. I understand that. 13 played, lost 3-1. There were going to be more available after that. I don't, again, if we're going by the idea that, we're going to contact trace these players, you're contact tracing even after testing 4, 5, 6 times? You're like, what? Okay. I'm not a virologist. Sure, let's say it could spread like that. Okay, fine. I'll give you that. I'll grant you that. No more argument there. You're filling a stadium with 21,000 spectators without a single COVID protocol, by the way. The spectators have not a single COVID protocol, including interaction with players. And players interacted with the fans who did not have to get tested. They didn't even have an honor system for the fans. Even if somebody came in coughing, sneezing, hacking, wheezing, darn near on a ventilator, they'd be like, oh, I mean, they got a ticket. What am I supposed to do? You got to let them in. And you're sitting here telling me that this was about player health and safety. Knock it off. Tell a better lie. Or if you don't want to tell a better lie, tell a lie to somebody who'll believe it. Because Wolfpack Nation is pissed off. And I love to see it. Some of the things are a little out there, a little outlandish. But there are very many legitimate points being brought up about how shady all of this was. Or all of this is, rather. Again, shout out to this Wolfpack team. Y'all are national champs in our hearts and our minds. I hope y'all get national championship rings. Y'all, to be honest, I have never been the type to knock I'm ordaining myself national championship thing, because when UCF did it, I felt like anybody who knows me knows I've always thought the group of 5 either needs to get a seat at the table and make their own playoff, because it wasn't fair that UCF ran the table while beating teams by an average of like 3 touchdowns. They won every game by an average of 3 touchdowns. And people were looking at them like, oh, well, we don't know if you're qualified because you... Stop it. Doesn't matter what you think. They can only play who's in front of them, and they whooped the wheels off of everybody that was in front of them. Point blank, period. So, again, the NCAA ought to be ashamed of themselves. Wolfpack, y'all are the 2021 champions. Wolfpack Nation, we can go ahead and celebrate the national championship, because this is nonsense. This team deserves better. These players deserve better. These coaches deserve better. We as a fan base deserve better. Members of the media deserve better. Anybody who is in or around this situation deserved better. Thank you all so very much for coming out and listening. I appreciate it. Let's keep these numbers going up, family. I thank you all so very much. Peace and love, y'all. And as always, go Pack.
You are Locked On NC State, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Clippers live to fight another day. Here's what our local experts are locked on today. The LA Clippers defeat the Phoenix Suns 116-102 in Game 5 to stay alive in their series, which now stands at 3-2 in favor of the Suns. Our local experts in Los Angeles, Chuck Mockler and William Updike, called it Paul George's best playoff performance ever. Listen to that today on Locked On Clippers. The defending champion Tampa Bay Lightning won Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals 5-1 over the Montreal Canadiens. Today on Locked On Canadiens, the major defensive adjustments that must be made to keep them in the series. Are Damian Lillard's days in Portland numbered? The answer is on the Locked On Today podcast. All the sports news you need in under 20 minutes. Follow Locked On Today, wherever you get podcasts. Local experts on the biggest stories. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.